Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Epic Meta Podcast. Today's episode, we will be discussing Man's Search for Meaning, a book by Viktor Frankl. George, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm good. I stay up late playing video games, so I'm a little tired, but it's all good. Um, Managed to squeeze in the work I have to do for the podcast between my gaming sessions, so I'm pretty happy. I was really worried I might delay the episode, but that's crucial work. So very happy that I got it all done.
What video game
Yep.
are you playing these days?
It's all computer games. Nobody knows about it. It's all this. It's called Steam games, and it's just a little city builder game that I'm playing. So yeah.
I used to play Civilization a lot. Do you know that game?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I never caught on to the trend when that game was popular, so I never got into it. I kind of missed the train on that. So these other games are, I would say, inspired by Civilization, but the mechanics are different, and it's easier to jump into or digest, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, very casual gamer, but somehow very addictive. I tried Civilization 1, but it was overwhelming, so I had to stop.
Yeah, I've wasted a lot of time playing that game.
hmm I don't know what it is, but someday somebody will figure this out. I mean, it's probably already have figured out, whatever chemicals released in the brain is
Dopamine.
so effective. But why is it more effective than doing the things I care to do? I don't get the same. I don't get the same effect. I mean,
I guess
I
because
bet.
there's in real time you're getting a return on investment. If you
Mm,
capture another city, that's satisfying in
it's
Civilization.
faster rate.
But if
Yeah.
are working on a book, you know, and you write a page of it, your return on investment is still probably years in the distance.
Maybe the rate of dopamine or whatever chemical is being released is faster, like way faster. But it's amazing because I can, it's same kind of, and then we're going off topics, but uh, same brain chemicals in regards to like video games, movies. I find more energy and compulsion or addiction or passion to do it than the stuff I want to do, like reading or it takes a different kind of brain to do it. And
I wonder if we had a button we could press that would release dopamine in our brain,
hmm
and so we
Neuralink, man.
performed a task that we wouldn't normally be compelled to do, but then we press the button after performing that task, if that would reinforce our desire to perform that
Yeah,
task. It
yeah.
probably would just reinforce our desire to press the button.
Yes. Have you seen the Black? Well, have you seen any Black Mirror episodes?
I watched the beginning of one, I watched one, and it
Mm,
was so disturbing that I never went back to that
yes.
show again.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. But some of the later episode, Netflix kind of took over the production. So they go into Facebook to the extreme, so to speak. I hate to bring it up, but social life and rating people. There's another episode where you can rewind because they put uh, essentially I recording software inside your brain,
Mhm.
so you can just rewatch stuff all day long. So people are constantly tuning out, for lack of a better term. But with Neuralink coming out, in the years to come, and you can just say, "Hey, I want to be excited about going to do chores," and then you activate that brain chemical, and you get all excited about your chores, and then turn it off. I wonder,
Well, there are
you know,
drugs that you can take that make it vastly more
yeah,
interesting to
yep,
clean and stuff, like
mm-hmm,
stimulants, for example.
yep,
I think Adderall has that effect as well.
mm-hmm.
So there
So
there are ways to do it. I don't know
yeah,
how healthy they are.
Well, I wonder if the access to those things are well, like right now it's controlled. Two, it wears out, but whereas Neuralink, it's in your brain. You can just turn it on, and would it get worse, right? Because that's the thing. Like, do you expect people to just, you know, have better control over themselves than fall away to human nature?
Yeah,
But
you would need somebody
yeah.
else to be in control of the distribution, I think.
Like this man is way interested in doing laundry for the last 5 days. uh, let's get back to topic and talk about, and we'll have you open and kind of share your introduction for Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay. I did have a couple of just general podcasting notes that I thought it might be interesting to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So we released our last episode, the one where we discussed Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Arrival, on YouTube. And since we released it, it's only received one view, and I think that was me.
Yeah.
So, which is interesting because other episodes get lots of views right off the bat, or slowly build. And that was an episode that I felt really good about. I thought it was really interesting. So
Yeah.
it's there's a whole psychology to this podcasting business, and a lot of it has to do with expectations and having those expectations fulfilled. And a lot of it has to do with the feedback we receive and the number of views we get and all that.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry. Yeah,
I'm not worried, and I'm observing.
I agree with you. There's a lot going on that you can easily fall into this universe of just looking at stats all day long. And that's what YouTube wants you to do, right? Like all this technology wants you to focus on that stuff so that you get more into it. But I watch numerous, I guess I watch enough for me to kind of wean myself, like I got into it and wean myself out of it with the same kind of journey that you're on, because when I started, that's why I made a marker, right? If we hit episode 10, then I know it's something that we can continue and do with or without audience, approval or followingship. It's just for us. So, yeah. Yes, I don't know. I don't know what's with YouTube or people, or there's some things you can't control. What we can control is the quality of the show and the schedule of continuing doing it. So, yeah, very interesting. I don't know. Maybe you should ask that, and if people hear this, maybe they comment. This is like, delay effect, of course. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe people were just busy and they don't care.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm searching for meaning through the statistics. Maybe that's not a good way to go about it. So anyway, we both listened to audio versions of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Mm-hmm. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who was imprisoned in Auschwitz, Nazi prison camp for Jews and other people. I guess it wasn't entirely for Jews. I think they put other types of people in there as well, but mostly Jewish people, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so the book is sort of divided into two parts. The first part is a description of his experience in the prison camp and how he observed his own and other people's psychology, how they dealt with the experience, the cruelty, the not knowing when it would end, the starvation, all that. And then the second part of the book is more about his own brand of psychology that he psychotherapy that he developed called logotherapy. And it's his contention that that a lot of psychological problems that people experience have their roots in a lack of meaning, and therefore a lot of these problems can be solved by finding meaning in life.
Yep. Good. Thank you.
You're
Good
welcome.
summation. I was just, yeah, I'm never good at that stuff, but
That's why I'm here.
yeah, my reaction to the book is like, first reaction is, I need a physical copy so I can kind of just read it over. There's a lot of things that you listen to that it's not it doesn't register the same way, or I don't receive it the same way. That said, I like the second part of the book more, and not that the first part of the book isn't important. It's just that I think if you watch the movie, oh God, what is that movie we brought up before, or any documentaries really? I forgot the one with the. I have to look it up now.
I need more information.
Yeah, I'm looking at. It's about the Nazi concentration camp, and the visual effects, will, for me, when the first time saw it, it shocked me more. So
you're talking about Schindler's List?
Yes, Schindler's List. So, or any other movies or any other documents you can think of, this is not. It's pretty realistic, and that's what he was describing. And to me, it's not like, I don't know about it or anything like that, but it's important to kind of understand from his perspective as well. But other than that, I didn't get as much. I mean, there are some things I get out of it, but the second part of the book is where I get more. So that's my kind of just reaction to it, per se, without diagnosing or thinking about the book too much. But yeah, my first.
Yeah, like the first part of the book was not entirely, but mostly a description of the experience itself, and then the second part of the book was sort of an objective overview of the psychology experience, I guess. But not entirely, because both parts contained
intertwined.
Yeah, both parts contained descriptions of the experience, and both parts contained descriptions of the psychology. So
yeah,
it's just more of a heavier emphasis on one and the other.
Yeah. So
let's talk about let's paint a picture of the experience. So the Jews in Europe were rounded up into these concentration camps, and they were made to perform hard labor and under harsh conditions. They weren't given sufficient clothes to be warm enough. They weren't given sufficient food. They were crammed into these, he called them huts. I guess they were like barracks where they all had to sleep close together. People were getting sick, and there wasn't really any medical treatment. And the sick one, and all the while, people were being gassed and sent to and burned, not alive, but I guess once they died, their bodies were incinerated in a crematorium. And I guess in a general sense, they were weeding out the weak people for this death, to gas them and incinerate them. But there was also sort of a random sense in that anyone at any time could be taken away and killed, and there really wasn't anything that you could do to. I mean, there were certain things you could do to sort of to maximize your chances of staying alive, and Viktor Frankl talks about that a lot. But there was also a big portion of it that was left to fate, and there were many decisions that Viktor Frankl describes, where he had the opportunity to join a work crew, and all the people on the work crew thought that they were going to remain alive, and all the people who weren't part of the work crew were gonna be killed. And it turned out to be the opposite. Those people in the work crew were sent to the ovens, and the people who didn't join the work crew remained alive. And so there were a lot of situations like that. So I guess living under those conditions brings about a psychological state where you feel sort of helpless, and you sort of give yourself up to fate.
Mm-hmm.
And some people gave up during those situations and died as a result, like they just lost the will to live.
Mm-hmm.
And other people who didn't give up, like Viktor Frankl, remained alive. And he attributes that not giving up to finding meaning in his suffering.
Mm.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And at the same time, like I'm not gonna say I know what he went through. That's just crazy. But a lot of the people he mentioned it in the book too. Prisoner of war experiences, and then he talked about it's not exactly the same because nothing can be as worse as that. But there are, and my dad went through it. He never talked about it, but I assume it's somewhere on the same line. His experience was re-education camp. They call it that, but it's almost the same thing. And this is after the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
When the U.S. left, 1975, the U.S. was just like, all right, we're done. We're getting on out of here. The Vietnamese or the Vietnam kind of what they call it reunification, right? Because for a long time the 38 parallel split North Vietnam from South Vietnam. So when that happened, when 1975 happened, everybody. So it's like U.S. South Vietnamese soldiers that work with the U.S. soldiers, right? Along with same thing with the Holocaust. It's the same tone, not exactly the same situation, but writers, protesters, professors, anybody that might have a dissenting opinion is going into this they call it re-education camp. Now eventually they let those people leave, but I'm sure there were terrible conditions as well. And the reason I bring that up is one, Viktor Frankl mentioned it, and two, your will to survive, I think a lot of time plays into I don't know how to describe it, but I would say as a so we talked about the human brain being had the frontal lobe and then the reptilian brain inside. A lot of time these conditions force you to kind of just forget everything that you are, and speaking with computer terms, like downgrade yourself to like an older version, or like a poor, like you have apps have additions and updates all the time. Well, this is like going back to Windows 95 or Windows 90. I don't know how to compare it to, but this is what is going on in my mind. This is what's going on, and I've never experienced anything like this. And the closest thing to it was Army basic training.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you with relation to the one note he said where you're trying to blend in and not stand out, you do exactly that right there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that with regards to jail or re-education camp or labor camp, you lose that frontal lobe kind of your self identity. Some of it is, I think, automatic, but when he said finding meaning, I think for him and a lot of other people, like outside reader, that is true. But I would say some of it is almost automatic. I don't know if, meaning is something that can help you survive, period. So I don't know if it's true. And I don't know how to prove him wrong either, but right? Because in his experience, it might be true, right? Like, how do you know what's going on inside someone else's head, how they survive through that day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
do you want to disprove it? Like, do you feel is that
no? Because I don't
urgent?
think it's Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's a right and wrong. I think that when I was reading the book, I was kind of on a different track or expectation because the book title said "Man's Search for Meaning,"
Hmm.
right? And he described the problem later on in part two of the book. I don't know where, but he talked about how teenagers or modern day people might have boredom, right? And he worked with clients or other therapists that adopted or adapted his methodologies. Also, kind of bring up cases where people are just bored, and instead of fixing their life, well, instead of going to therapists with actual medical condition, people want help in regards to fixing their life, right? And he, whatever time frame he's at, that's my understanding of therapists in now modern day age, right? Like people just, I don't know, want a therapist to fix everything. Well,
Hmm.
his approach allow you to kind of switch perspective, and he talked about the same problem with teenagers getting bored when they're unemployed, right?
Hmm.
And I say, forget teenagers, everybody's having that problem. And so my reading of this book, I was expecting like, man, if he if I could read this book and fix that kind of cognitive problems, that would be great. So going through this book, of course, I know about the Holocaust survival, and I was kind of looking for that, and I didn't get it until part two. Um, but it gives you perspective because if you can survive something as horrible as a Holocaust, maybe meaning and passion and all these modern day problems or first world problems as we describe it isn't as big of a deal as we think it is, right? Like is it that big of a deal to be 100% in love with what you do for your life? Like, is that true? And so finding meaning for him with his situation, because he's a therapist, I can't, he's a psychologist as well. He's way more trained in this thing than I am. But I'm curious if he, when he was experiences, looked through that lens first versus just like a lay person, like a normal person going through it.
Well,
So,
I think there's a trap here that we can fall into, and
mm,
that is in comparing our experience in life to the worst possible experience ever, which is, which you could argue
hmm
is the Nazi prison camp. And then to say, well, I'm not in a Nazi prison camp, so therefore I don't, any suffering that I feel is not worthy, or
yeah,
it's me being not grateful enough, or the problem is me because he survived the Nazi prison camp. I'm in no way close to living in a Nazi prison camp, so therefore, if I'm
mm,
dissatisfied, there's something wrong with me, and I think that's wrong.
mm,
I think everyone suffers in their own way,
mm,
and all suffering is relative to that,
yeah,
from one person to another, and suffering sucks no matter what situation you're in. I mean, they call it suffering for a reason, right?
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you think that's a trap or a bias? Because yeah, like you said, all suffering is suffering, but you know, um, yeah, I guess I do fall into that trap when I was reading the book, but I was expecting like, and he did do a TED talk apparently because I was looking him up. I was trying to understand local therapy versus just any other kind of therapy.
Hmm.
How it's distinct from some of the school of thoughts, and it's a little bit, I would say, minutia or detail for me to kind of, without being a studying or reading about psychology, understanding the differences.
I think the key
Uh,
to it is logotherapy attempts to um, find meaning in the life of the patient as
mm,
as a therapeutic means to to help them.
that's tricky. That's and I think he mentioned it too. He mentioned it being a very hard school of psychology or approach to therapy. Correct? Like, or is that something I picked up randomly? I
Hmm.
was curious.
Uh,
Did you get the same thing?
I'm not sure about that, but there's a point that I want to make before I forget about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this has to do with the relativity of suffering. Part of our suffering, that trap is a factor in our suffering. So the fact that we can't fully appreciate our suffering as suffering because it's not as bad as other people's suffering is part of our suffering. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Actually,
So that's our, I mean,
it's a human thing.
Yeah,
I
and
would say.
you talked about unemployment as a form of suffering, and that I've experienced that, and it's
Me too. Yep, I've done that as well.
It's an incredible form of suffering because they say that work is a means to dignity and a means to find meaning in life, and that is true to an extent, especially if you're doing something that you enjoy, that you're passionate about. But if you're unemployed, you're be willing to settle for any old work, even if it's not your passion, because there's something humiliating about being unemployed. It's like you're not valued by other people. And you're looking for your value to be ratified from external sources as well. It's hard to say, okay, I derive my self-worth internally. But when you're put in that situation, it's very difficult to generate that self-worth internally.
Exactly. Yes, you're right. And I think I agree. And it's like a improv work here, yes and kind of thing. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the larger issue here with our to go wider and to go broader is to say that our society program us to think that way, right? Like I wish that wasn't the case, because here's the reason why. I went through Army basic training, and there are many things I don't like and don't think is necessary, but the one thing that I did get out of it is self-worth. Is amazing amount of how do I define this, in unbroken self-worth value. Like, it's really hard for me to feel what we feel when we, because I went through a place of unemployment before I joined the Army, and then coming back out is not so much the honor or all this stuff that they advertise, as far as, like, at least for me, right? Let's just boil that down to personal value. Our society, the way we're programmed, thinks of a job and employment and all this stuff. But what if we grew up in a society where your self-worth was already built in? Everybody go through something like Army basic training or military or something, where your self-worth when you come out is, it's sky high. It's amazing, the feeling, because they almost every military training in the world do the same thing. Like, they break you down and they build you back up, and the things that you accomplish, it's very stereotypical, but you never thought to accomplish, mainly because of mental toughness. And now you see, like, podcasts, books, TED Talks, these veterans are trying to share that, but it's very hard to share that and understanding it and experience it are two different things, right? I apply it to riding bicycles. Like, you can learn and understand that all you need to do is sit on the bicycle and pedal, because the faster you pedal, the more upright you stay. But experiencing it, in your mind of balancing and unable to break, all that stuff is very different. And I would say it's the same thing with finding meaning and employment and feeling self-worth. I wish our society could separate the two, so that when you growing up, going through school or something, you already feel amazing and worthy and important. And it takes a lot for somebody to, our society isn't built that way. So when you
Right.
when you're unemployed, oh my God, it's terrible.
And to make it worse, like, our society, as you say, puts a heavy emphasis on employment and deriving self-worth from employment. But we're moving into a phase in our history when employment is more difficult to
Yeah.
come by, and particularly employment that you're
Yeah.
passionate about. But we still have that
Yeah.
same priority of self-worth. So it's like it's the
It's catch
worst of both
22, right? Yeah.
worlds.
So I wish you at
Yeah.
some point and I wish it's gonna be a hard shift, but at some point we have to. I really think UBI, Universal Basic Income, is a thing that we have to adopt. I mean, if we take it
But that doesn't address the meaning
right,
issue though. The
right. So then,
UBI, it just gives
right,
you
the question
money.
then becomes, if you have unlimited money and resources and time, and let's say you don't have to worry about food, shelter, water, or any kind of related income, would your meaning to life or search for meaning or satisfying in life be better or worse? Um, and I take it back to, imagine life without electricity, like not picking on a certain
Hmm.
group of people, but there's a certain group of humans in this world who uh, by choice choose to live without electricity, um, and live a life without modern technology, almost going back to the I can't agrarian, I can't say the word well, but
You just said it. You said it.
farming life, right? And does that mean you have more meaning? Does that makes your life, this search for meaning better or worse, compared to all that we experience today in the regards to the modern world? So I'm very curious how hum.
I think it has to do with when you're reliant on electricity to make you feel comfortable and good about yourself. I mean that you're making yourself
Mm,
vulnerable. When my family and I lived in Connecticut like more than 7 years ago, and there was a freak storm in October where it snowed, wet
mm-hmm,
snow, and the leaves were still on the trees. So what this did was it weighted down the branches, and so all these tree branches
mm,
broke, and then hit the power lines. And so we were out of power for 12 days. And by the end of those 12 days, it was it was a very, really, really tough experience. And I mean, we had enough food. It was a little dicey, it was cold. But just psychologically, it was
yeah,
traumatic to go
yeah,
through
not
that.
fun.
And, I had, my daughters were much younger than, they were little
Mm,
kids. So, and I was obviously responsible for feeding and, taking care of them and sheltering them and
mm-hmm.
all that. And just entertaining them, there's no electricity. It's,
Yeah,
the amount of entertainment choices drops very quickly. And then when night rolls around and there's no lights,
yeah.
it's psychologically, so I guess the point of that is electricity makes you very reliant on electricity for your own well-being,
Yeah,
and perhaps those people who are living without electricity are trying to make themselves more self-reliant in
but
that
does that
regard.
mean that you have more meaning in life, and this modern suffering comparing to suffering that's placed upon you, like a labor camp situation or the Holocaust or jail or anything that's you're not at fault and is being like things are being happened to you? Would you gain self-worth in either situation? Where does self-worth come from, right? Because
So yeah, you're defining your self-worth and your life meaning in a different context when you live without electricity, I think. We don't realize how much we rely on electricity for our self-worth. And we need only to live through a couple of days without power to discover that.
does
Um, but self-worth is something, or life meaning, I think, is a little bit different than that. I mean, I think what they're doing, as I said, without living without electricity is making themselves more resilient. But life meaning is not just resilience. It's doing something that it's having a purpose for your life, which often is defined in terms of what you do, I guess, or what you believe. And so a lot of what we do is based on electricity. Like I work from home, two jobs, and I'm working through the internet. That requires electricity. If there's no electricity, I can't do my job. So in that respect, there's, life meaning is connected.
Yeah, I think one podcast, discussion is not going to help me kind of answer the questions. I have to basically.
Yes, it will.
But after reading this book, I find myself asking more questions because the question we just posed, right, like self-worth different from life's purpose. And I want to not question, but basically study after Viktor Frankl or major in psychology a little bit more because I'm now curious as I read the book, how does someone reading the book it kind of explains how he survived it, but to me, like, it's not enough. I'm curious about, if I could do it. I'm curious how we can do it in such a way that is systematic and so that everybody can take his experience and then add to their own life, right? How can we do that on a mass scale so that we always have 100% happiness, which is somewhat unrealistic, but is there a way for we to build it into our education or as part of growing up without
that's a good
without making everybody reading this book and asking this, because I can tell you if I make 100 college kids read this book, it doesn't mean that they're gonna get anything. It's they'll just read it and throw it away.
Right.
So the question becomes, how do we build that in so that as we grow older, we don't have a lot of the problems that we have today in our current society, right? How do we not tie life's purpose or meaning, or at least the search for it, to self-worth? Because I think you can search it for all your life, including me, and not feel terrible. I don't have to. Yeah.
Well, okay, so two things. One, definitely our educational system and the way parents bring up their kids infuses in them this priority that meaning in life is found through employment and wealth and those sorts of things. So that needs to change. I don't know how that can be changed, but let's say that's an area to focus on. In the book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about that there's a choice that we can make no matter what circumstance we find ourselves in. And that choice is our attitude towards that circumstance. So we can choose. So let's say we find ourselves in a prison camp. Or let's say we find ourselves unemployed. That's probably a better example. We can choose to have the attitude, oh, this sucks. Oh, woe is me. All that. Or we can choose to have the attitude, okay, what can I learn from this experience? How can I navigate through it? Like your meaning becomes confronting the challenge at hand. And as opposed to complaining about it or feeling like a victim.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And easier said than done, obviously, but there is a choice there. And we've talked about this before. In our self-help podcast, we talked about The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And the author of that book talks about the same thing. In every situation that we find ourselves, we have a choice as to what our attitude will be in the face of that situation. He says the exact same thing as Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. Yeah, would
So
you say that, his
that
his his book really is kind of just should be renamed, should be renamed to because when I read it, I keep thinking of, I keep thinking of all these things that you mentioned, like self-help, and I was thinking specifically of Who Moved My Cheese. I'm not sure if you ever read that book, but it's kind of this. It's very
no.
short book. It essentially is perspective. It's perspective shifting and asking that question that you just mentioned. Is there something I can do, or are you just gonna say, like, "Woe is me," this is terrible, this situation's terrible, like, blah blah blah, just whining and complaining, or you ask the question, how do I do X? How do I solve problem Y? And Who've Moved My Cheese is about shifting your mindset or perspective into like a solution seeking, or a way of getting out of the spiral. Because I can see this kind of situation, like he mentioned, in some cases where people just give up, and
Hmm.
um, you don't even have to be a doctor to know that how many days or hours somebody's left. um,
Yeah, the people in the prison camp reached a point where they were so broken down that they gave
mm,
up. And he talks about um, people would save cigarettes because they could use them to barter
things.
for
Yeah.
food
Yeah.
or other things. And when people reached into their pocket and started smoking their last cigarettes, everyone knew that they had given up and they had lost the will to live. And sure enough, within 48 hours or 3 days or whatever, those people who did that had died. Whereas the people who held on to their cigarettes because there was some future, they were projecting into the future that they would need the cigarettes to barter to stay alive. Um, they were the ones who were more likely to
Hmm.
survive. And so meaning is not necessarily like I'm gonna
A
I don't
static.
know, I'm gonna be president of the United States or solve or cure cancer. Or it doesn't have to be anything that big. It just has to be a reason to keep on living.
And I'm not sure if the book, like my reading of the book, I'm not sure if it agree with me. But the question came up when I was consuming it, is that, does it have to be static, right? Like what happens between you being unemployed, you being having a job, you having kids, or before having kids? Like, when your life change, does meaning have to stay static throughout that whole journey or cycle, right? Because I'm theorizing. I'm not a
No, I
psychologist, but I'm theorizing meaning can change for you, and it's fine to have that.
it can it's like many cycles
Mm,
of meaning. So there can be larger, more abstract meanings that carry you through your whole life, but there can be day-to-day
yeah,
meanings or minute-to-minute
yeah.
meanings too. It's like the hero's journey. I know you think it's funny when I bring that up because I bring it
Hmm.
up all the time, but I think a lot about it, and it's meaningful to me. So, in a movie, the hero has really just one journey. But in real life, if you want to apply that hero's journey to real life, there's many different overlapping journeys going on all at once.
Yes.
So there's your entire life. That's maybe you can see that as one journey, but then there are day to day and hour to hour various journeys and they're all overlapping
Yes.
each other, and there's all different mentors for each one, and there or maybe no mentor at all, and there's and they cycle through each other constantly and overlap each other constantly. Um, but I guess you can't make a movie depicting that.
Yeah.
It's easy to depict one journey at a time in the
I
form of a
have a
story.
tangent thought for you. Like, of course, to our listeners, this is completely tangent, but I've been thinking uh, about this for years. That what if the movies we like, going to the theory of multiple universe and different dimensions and all that stuff, unlimited
Mhm.
different realities that are similar to our own. What if the movies you watch are actually stories about somebody's life, just like it's supposed to be, like a movie. However, it's only the best part. Like you never seen the boring or like the you never see any characters do well. Sometimes you do on TV, like doing laundry or something something terrible like washing dishes, just sitting there staring out at
Yeah.
the you know at the at the sky, wondering, daydreaming, and then they go immediately to the action part. Well, what if that portion is cut out, and that our lives are actually movies for somebody else, but when they watch it, they only see the best part, the most exciting stuff, and that all the
Or the part that's there that's necessary to
yes.
tell the
What if
story.
every part that we think is terrible is actually cut out of a movie that's already completed somewhere in this universe, and somebody else is watching it, um, and so
Mhm.
you don't have that perspective because you're not seeing it. You're going through the motion, and if that's true, just completely tangent. If that's true, well then how important is it for you to, if we're going with the sense of multiple meanings, which I agree with you, that makes a lot more sense than I think I don't know if the rest of the work culture, but at least for me, like I sense this corporate culture of imposing, like finding your one passion in life or finding meaning. It's just like, no, what if I have multiples?
Yeah.
You can't expect me to grow up
Right.
and do one thing or have one interest. I don't know if that's wise or smart, but our culture tends to
Mhm.
push us that way, and it just sometimes very exhausting and unfair. So just I don't know if there's another word for it, but
Yeah. So I mean, we don't have to listen to that. you
so do
know,
you think?
I mean, it's there and it's there and it's very loud and it's very hard not to listen to it, but we don't
Do you
have
think
to,
man search for meaning
right?
argue against that per se?
Against a search for
Against
meaning.
that corporate social culture of finding one passion or doing you know
I'm against. Um, I'm against that sort of that priority being imposed on a person from an external source. I think that has to be generated from within in order to be authentic.
Do you think
Um,
Viktor Frankl agreed
if
on that sense, or how would he?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do, I do, because he had to come up. He had it's man's search for meaning. So the man is the one searching
Mm.
for meaning. It's not man's acceptance of meaning given to him from outside.
Yeah.
It's man's personal search for meaning. So and he's an existentialist. He's not a. I don't. I think he was an
Yeah.
atheist, Viktor Frankl. I mean, he was of the Jewish culture, but I don't think that he
No.
believed in God.
Yeah.
And so, and the existentialists, to the extent I understand that philosophy, was all about creating your own
Mm.
meaning in life because, in ages past, when religion was more of a culturally adopted belief system, that meaning you could derive meaning
Mm.
from that, and it was like objectively there for you. It was like an objective experience of you could tap into that objective experience of meaning. But in modern times, after World War One and World War Two, when people started questioning the role of institutionalized religion, we lost that. Along with questioning that, the truth of that, we
Mm.
lost the objective meaning that it gave us. And so now we have to, but we can't live without meaning. We need meaning, so we have to come up with it on our own.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a better situation than. I mean, it's how we have
Yeah.
evolved. So better or worse is kind of irrelevant. It's the path that we're on, And many people probably bemoan that path and say, it would have been better to never have questioned those
I see
things.
that. Yep, I agree.
But
do you think that his work should be included in the self-help book instead of like the reason I asked is during our self-help episode we didn't mention his book, right? But it's so like it's so value and it has a lot of fact throughout our society. From like I keep hearing it, right? Like this is my first time reading it, but somehow I agree with many of the concepts and I've heard many of the same things through other works, right? So it's not 100% new to me. It's new because I've read it for the first time. You've read it multiple times. Did you encounter it when you were in that phase of absorbing self-help or personal development kind of books?
No. When the first time I read it, I think I've only read it once before, actually. And it was assigned in some class that I was in. And I think I approached it as an assignment. I don't think it really hit home with me at the time because I was in college, I think. And when you're in college, your meaning is sort of objectively provided to you, from externally, like you're a student. And it's your meaning is to supposedly get an education and to interact socially with your peer group. And then once college is over, that meaning is that rug of meaning is mercilessly ripped out from underneath you. And that's when this book could have
been helpful.
Helped me, I guess. But I don't think at that time I would have been open to it then. I was too into being a victim. I was too into wallowing in my own, and I'm being harsh on myself because I mean, in that position, I couldn't see any other way to be. I didn't have. I probably should have joined the army.
Well, now it goes back to the question: how do you segment out self-worth versus finding meaning? Because I feel like they're intertwined again, right? If you're 100% like very resilient and kind of understand your self-worth, you would have I would say a capability to stay calm during transition in your life when you don't have meaning. Like let's say you go to college and you take, after graduation trying to find a job, and let's say you're unsuccessful, which a lot of kids are gonna have experience either now or will soon, very soon. In fact, there's a lot of I guess my-ish generation where they do find work, but the amount of college debt is just overwhelming, that is overbearing, and again, it's not, something they're happy about. But how do you get self-worth and then get life's meaning? I feel like they're very close, or at least intertwined or adjacent to each other, and one affects the other almost fundamentally, so that you can be resilient and then survive through whatever changes going on in your life. I have a difficult.
I think the message of Viktor Frankl's book is that meaning comes first. So if you find a meaning in life, then you will naturally have the self-worth to propel you through bad times.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with him, to be honest, on that front.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very good.
I haven't fully thought that through, so I don't.
Well,
have
it's kind of like Freud, right? Like the way I understand it is another school of psychology, right? Kind of like if you study psychology, you're gonna have to study Freud, and he kind of centralized everything on this warp, like the id and the ego, and kind of the whole school of psychology stem from that fundamental idea, right? And it doesn't mean you have to accept it; you have to understand it. And I understand and I kind of like it, but at the same time, I don't know, at least for my personal life, if that's really true. Like, I think you can just wander through life aimlessly, be happy, and constant search for meaning, as long as you kind of look for one. But I know plenty of people that don't look for meaning. They're doing fine.
On the outside.
Yeah.
Who knows how they're doing on the inside. But I get
Yeah.
your point that it may be
To
possible
not.
to
Yeah,
not have
because
meaning, but maybe finding meaning in life is one way to get you to self-worth, and maybe it's the
yeah,
biggest way, but it might not be the
because he brought
only
up
way.
self-actualization, right? And he mentioned that some people. It's kind of like my description earlier of the capability of people to kind of just turn off the frontal lobe. Not that I had experienced what he experienced, but he mentioned there are people that can still hold true to themselves. I think that's what you're trying to say in the labor camps, even if everybody was a number and they rip your humanity away, but some people still are nice in the face of everything, and some people
Mhm.
still joke and have humor in the worst of situation, and that helps you survive. And I'm curious if he see those people having meaning, right? Like does he think that everybody in the camp that survived found their meaning versus everyone that didn't survive, uh, and gave up? Is that what do you think?
Hmm. So, okay, what I mean, how do we define what Viktor Frankl means by meaning?
Life's
It's
purpose. Yeah,
it's very
I
meta.
guess we have to say life's purpose. My alternate
Yeah.
answer to that.
So I think during some of the book, his meaning was just to survive through the next day.
Mm,
I think, he also talks about thinking about future lectures he would give on surviving in a prison camp, and you know, so again, there's like multiple levels of
yeah.
meaning. It's like second to second level of meaning, and then
Yes.
there's like long term level of meaning as well. I think, and so what what does that mean? Like, is he talking about a goal that he wants to accomplish later on in life, or is he talking about um, some role that he can fill at any given point in
Mm,
time? Or I don't know that it's that well defined, but I think it's up to the person to define
yes.
it, right? So again, it's man's search for meaning. So what do I mean by meaning? It's whatever I mean by meaning, right? Whatever I find meaning
Yeah.
in is my
You're
meaning, right?
yeah, I
Right?
guess. I mean, you're not wrong. How can you? We're gonna have to ask Viktor Frankl or any student that follow his kind of school of psychology. Uh,
It's anything that I find meaningful
true.
myself, and that has to come from inside
Yeah.
of me, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't find it meaningful. Well, I guess it's possible that I could agree with some outside source in terms of what is meaningful, but
No.
but even in that case, I still have to
Yeah. No.
agree with it.
Subjective
So
is the key here. Um, let's take our because we can just I feel like we can keep going on forever because it's very I would say it's very interesting. It raises more questions for me reading this book than answering it, and I like the book a lot. I think it works a reread, and it's something I have to kind of just yearly or some kind of schedule reread this book because it just I haven't found all the answers I need. But applying some of the things we learned from this book to 1984 because it was such a
mhm.
a depressing state of affairs. Do you think that if this was exposed to the character in the book, Winston, would he? Well, I don't know. Uh, you know, do better. Does this?
To an extent. So yeah, I think the message of 1984 is, in the beginning of the book, Winston Smith found his life to be without meaning. But then he met Julia, and then he had meaning, and things seemed to improve for himself. But in the end, O'Brien broke him down so that he no longer had that meaning. So, yeah, I've thought about 1984 in terms of Viktor Frankl's idea that you have the choice at any given time to define your own attitude to the situation in which you find yourself. And I think for most people and for most times, that's probably true. But in the case of 1984, I think the point was that if enough pressure is put and enough suffering is inflicted upon you, that can even change.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's a fair adoption either. Like, I don't know if man search for meaning can be applied to 1984. The reason being, in our real world, our society have a natural baseline understanding of what life should be. Somewhere online, all humans kind of agree on some things, right? But if you take a look at a situation like North Korea or kids becoming fighters and the warlords of in Africa, I say that humans fundamentally have a programming factor in regards to your society, like brain development. So if I take away your definition, similar to 1984, right? All modern children, if I take away your understanding of the word freedom or democracy or choice, will you be able to actually, cognitively understand those concepts? Because if you grow up in that society and you read this book, Man Search for Meaning, it won't work. It won't apply to you because you won't even know what they're talking about.
So, are you familiar with Maslow?
Hierarchies of needs? Yep.
Yeah. So, in a sense, you can't get to the meaning level until you have other basic needs taken care of. So, your first, I forget what the hierarchy
food,
is.
Water, and shelter. Yeah.
Like there's
physical.
Yeah, I mean, there's survival on the bottom. There's survival on the bottom, and once you have those needs met, then it's like comfort or entertainment, or I don't know what it is, but higher up on the hierarchy is meaning to life, and so you have to have those other needs met first before you can get to the meaning need, because you won't even consider it a priority until that happens.
Yeah. So,
and I don't know if that's true for everyone, but it's true for the bulk of.
And I don't. Humanity. Yeah, and if I cap you out at like certain existential level, 1984 was trying to do that basically, right? Like if I take away your food and water and just basically you're uncomfortable all the time, you don't have time to spend thinking about this, other stuff, and
it's less likely that you will.
So I think it's unfair to apply only because Winston was alive pre-party, right? He remembered a time before when there was, I would say, normal society, almost blackout society. So it's not fair. I don't think it's fair to apply this to him, but at the same time, because he grew up in a two different society and 1984 party was trying to press this on him, I argue that he has somewhat of a choice, but it was literally, if you take the brain as a program, I can just delete everything and put a mandatory amnesia effect on you so that you're programmed differently coming out of this, the situation. So, and that was done to Winston. So I'm not sure if this is 100% applicable, but very interesting.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to consider them both and see, it's just interesting to consider that. I don't know if fairness is the correct.
Yeah, I don't know either. to a fictional character, I don't think it's a correct term, but
another context in which we can look at this is Sam Harris's free will.
Yeah, I saw your notes.
Because they talk about, in the gap between stimulus and response, you have the opportunity to choose what your attitude is going to be to the situation in which you find yourself, right? So Sam Harris would argue that choice is an illusion, and it's based solely on your. Well, first of all, you don't know where the decision to choose comes from. Yeah, and you also. Any decision you do make would be shaped by all your previous experiences. Up yours, Sam Harris. I don't know what to say.
I honestly, actually, I can't disagree with him. I agree with him and understand like he's wrong at the same.
Well, then what are we doing here then?
Yeah,
That effectively strips us of any meaning at
because
all.
everything that he said is technically correct, but at the same time, it's like that's not how any individual experience life. Like he defined things a certain way that he's correct, but it's just like it's not true, right? You can be correct and not not true at the same time, and I don't know how he did that, but what's
and then he also uses shame
yeah
to enforce his view. Like if you don't agree with me, then you're just too stupid to understand.
You know,
is his
correct.
attitude.
I don't know if his see now I'm curious if he what he thinks of Man's Search for Meaning, and if he experienced anything like this, and what his conclusion or new book would be on this stuff. Because certainly, do you still the argument is like free will still exists in this kind of thing, and it is your choice to choose how you react or respond to your conditions, right? Like that will help you. But if you you take away stuff like free will, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because I think that the last piece of humanity, when you strip of everything, it's the essence of what is left is really you. In these kinds of suffering, that is fundamental. And if you take away that, well then, this book would have never been written. I don't think that's true. This is almost like a testament against that. Do you think that they would agree with each other, like Viktor Frankl or Sam Harris, if they were kind of like both writers at the same time frame?
No, I don't, because Viktor Frankl emphasizes this choice that you can make in terms of your attitude, and Sam Harris writes that the choice is an illusion. Now, but the choice still happens, whether it's an illusion or not. So Sam Harris might be of the position that even though the choice is ultimately an illusion, we still experience it, and to that extent, it's there. But this is all very esoteric and all very abstract and somewhat divorced from our actual experience in life.
I would say,
which is what I think Viktor Frankl is trying to approach. Our actual experience in life, and how to navigate that. Whereas I think Sam Harris is not offering a navigation through life experience, but more like
I would say Sam Harris is hardware, and Viktor Frankl's software, which is like almost all humans experience. Is on that level. The difference is the physical makeup of the brain and the brain chemistry, where thoughts come from, versus what is purpose and meaning to your life is very different. Two very different questions from two different perspectives. So understanding the hardware of ourselves is just like it's almost biology at that point. Versus
they're addressing two different things.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing. So, and that leads to a question that I have written in the notes, and it might be another way to look at this. Like, is finding meaning in life and believing it an act of the will? And I think Viktor Frankl would say it is, and I think Sam Harris would say there is no will.
That's a really tough question to answer, because it's kind of like your other tangent thought, like how do you define meaning? How do you define that? So once you define it and believing in it, I would say just the fact that you are asking a question is enough.
I mean, to a certain extent, meaning is a feeling. It's a tangible feeling or emotion. It's not like an intellectual
But
understanding.
choosing to pursue, I think, is the act of the will, right? If you're unhappy and then you're like, hey, this might make me happy, and then pursuing that, I think that's the will part. That's the choice.
Hmm.
Uh,
But let's say you find yourself in a position where there are no good choices. There's nothing that will make you happy. And so can you, through your will, create a meaning to get you through that, and will that actually work?
good question. I would,
That's
yeah,
what Viktor Frankl
yes,
is saying that
yeah, I
you
would say
can.
yes too.
And maybe even just survival can be a
Yeah,
compelling meaning,
I mean,
I would think. I mean,
survival is one, and then getting through just to, uh, like if you break down a big goal down to subcomponents and smaller goals. Let's say you live in, whatever situation you're in, and curiosity bring you to this other choice of pursuing this other life. Well, I would say make sub goals and pursuing even the smallest goal, and just knowing that. Uh,
right, but for that goal to be meaningful
mhm,
to you, you have to feel it, right? You can't just intellectually
yeah,
define it as a goal that you
yeah,
want to achieve. There has to be an emotional
it has
component
to be
to
for
it.
you, regardless of other, like outside factors. It has to come from you and deciding. Yeah, I agree. Cool. This is the most, I would say, uh, I would say,
Yeah, I didn't know where we
yes.
would go
I
with
was really
this,
worried
but
about, and it's also the most like philosophical as we get. I mean, almost the same thing as free will. At least we have that one to kind of, I don't know, go along with. But with this book, I think it's very subjective, and it's just, I would say I would highly recommend to read it, but at the same time, it's, don't expect it to answer any questions. You just have more questions for yourself than anything else. But it does make you feel good.
it 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 provides a space in which to explore this question.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think without it, it gives a frame of context, right? Without it, I think if you don't study psychology like me, or been exposed to this kind of stuff, you just kind of have random thoughts and then have nowhere else to go. And this book gives you some kind of framework to go with and understand, you know, a little bit more about human beings, I suppose. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, there you have it. I would. Do you think we do
Yeah.
reviews on this podcast show? It's not reviews. It's more like um
I think this podcast is a search
in
for
and of
meaning
itself.
in
Yes.
itself. Yeah.
Very meta.
And, and so we use whatever, we're exploring that we to as a lens through which to search for this meaning,
Correct.
as a telescope.
Yes. Filter. Yeah.
And very gradually, the actual purpose of this podcast is being revealed to us.
This is the most. This is meta. All right. I don't. Yeah. I don't know if there's another meta podcast out there, but this is as meta as it gets.
Yes.
Yes. Any. Yeah.
So good job.
Thank you.
Success.
I try. It's
Congratulations.
and I hope to our listener this has been somewhat educational, entertaining. It's very hard to talk about something without actually, I don't know, just giving you a summary of it is not really, you know, enough. Especially for something like this book, which I find very, yeah, I had to dig deeper later on in my cycles when I have time, because it's very interesting to me. But
Yes.
any shout out that you want, or any last thoughts that you have?
No, I think that's good enough.
Same as always. I think the shout out is to our listener to comment. If you've read this before, if you haven't read it, will you read it, etc. What do you think of our take on it? And I think that's the word I can come up with. Most of the time, we just have a take on something, rather than a review. per se. Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. George, you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hello, listeners. This is George with the Epic Meta Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Did you know that you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube? You probably knew that one of those was the case, but the other ones are the case as well. Please be sure to click the like button if that's in accord with your reality. You can also share our podcast with your friends, give us a 5-star rating, and all of that. Please also give us your comments. Be very interested to read them. But more importantly than all of that, just continue to listen to the show. And as Thang would say, be good and be well until we meet again.